Is the DA a racist party? What's DA's stance on Israel and Palestine?
Well, the answer is very simple. We want a two-state solution.
So the DA condemns.
We condemn violence on both sides.
Put forward why DA? But the messaging sometimes, what informs it?
Give me an example of the message that you would be talking to. Rescue South Africa?
Yeah, rescue like...
Okay, I'll tell you why we said rescue South Africa.
Welcome back to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. With me, your host, TJ Maslela. Welcome to the show. In today's session, we're going to be going into the manifesto of the Democratic Alliance. And here to give us insight and make it palatable is none other than DA's Gauteng Premier Candidate, Mr. Msimanga. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, TJ, for having me. Great to be with you and to also be able to then engage with your followers.
Give us a breakdown of your journey from how you got into politics, how you got into DA, and now as Premier Candidate.
Look, I don't think that it's something that I had already pre-planned when I was still at school or even afterwards. It has always been an issue of me wanting to go through high school, go to university, get my degree, and start working in the private sector, make money, and, live a happy life. But it so happened that I ended up, in a job where I had an opportunity to travel extensively, so throughout the world. And I had an opportunity to be, in developed countries and in developing countries and in failed states. And I was able to then see, and this is how I ended up being so much passionate about politics and passionate about decisions that the country is actually making. So having, had that opportunity to see from, being somewhere where money was taken, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars were taken while we're in a meeting out of the president's case, given to somebody to go and sort out a problem without even any accounting, being in place. To being able to go into a country where things were running like clockwise. People were being apologized to for a bus that was arriving literally 2 minutes late. And then, you make the contrast to then say, here are things that are running and people are now worried about a bus that is running 2 minutes late versus where things are so fallen apart that, it doesn't matter. The only thing that you can do is march on to the president's office and then demand that something needs to be done. And without any kind of accountability, something is just money just given to you and then you go and sort out that. So you're able to then see that. And that for me, when I came home, I said, well, look, I can see, some of these things beginning to rear its ugly head in South Africa. And to then say, do I sit back or do I get involved? And this was quite a number of years back. I decided that I needed to get involved. But initially it was never really to then say get involved in a sense of, running for office or anything like that. I wrote to Tony Leon at some point and said, look, when he came to Atteridgeville, I attended a rally that, he came to the Atteridgeville Hall. And it was all nice and confettis and balloons and all of that. But the message, I felt I could get it. But I was like, thinking the everyday person doesn't get it. The everyday man doesn't get it because it's too technical, it's too high level. And I'm not saying I was, very intellectual at that point. I wasn't. But I felt that message was not talking to the heart of somebody. It was talking more numbers, and that to certain people really didn't even make any difference. You're talking about numbers that somebody cannot even phantom that amount of money that you're talking to, or the stats that the stats that you would be talking to. That for me is what made me to write a letter to Tony and say, look, you're going about this the wrong way. You need to then get a message that people will be able to then get and understand. You need to talk to the hearts of the people and not just the brains. And, lo and behold, I got a call and, from the CEO of the party, Ryan Kutsi at the time, and said, look, we would want to then engage you. We went, met. Later on, I was offered a job. I actually then had to leave a job that was paying me much more than what they were willing to pay. So when I got involved, I was not really directly in politics, but I was then assisting in communication and in putting together a strategy around communication for the party. And yeah, so started a program we called Lead at the time. We started, doing marketing and campaigning in those in new markets that we wanted to then start growing into. We started identifying leaders in those areas, and then so got elected as a councillor. I was actually offered to then go to Parliament. I felt that I wasn't ready. I just had my firstborn son at the time, and I felt, look, I cannot have a situation where I'm in Parliament 4 or 5 days of the week and only getting to see my newborn, only for a short time. So decided not to take it up. Later on, I was offered I got an opportunity to be elected as a councillor in S1E. Got elected then as a regional chairperson. Then moved on to the legislature. Went back, elected as a mayor, and then back into the legislature again. So that is, in a nutshell, what has been my move, in the political circle.
Okay. So for those that don't know the history of DA and how it came about, how would you say, how was DA formed, and what are its core values and objectives?
Well, look, I mean, the DA has always been a liberal party with a liberal outlook. Or you go back to the days of Helen Suzman, and even before that, and in the predecessors, you would have had the PPP, and then you had your.
You're not talking about
No. You had the Progressive Party then, and you then also had the Democratic Party, which was led then for some time by Helen Suzman, and then later by Tony Leon. You would also and others, Slabet being some amongst those. You ended up also having a situation where you had, for the first time, one MP in Parliament who was Helen Suzman fighting against the apartheid regime. And people don't know this, but she was the one who was saying Nelson Mandela will have rights even when in prison. Is the only member of Parliament that went to do an oversight and to visit Nelson Mandela to say, what are the conditions like here? And you need to get your letters from your family and not deducted your letters as they are. You deserve, to have humanity. And these are people that fought. And, there's a famous saying by her that says, it's not my questions to you that is embarrassing, it's the answers that you give that is embarrassing. When he was questioning the National Party at the time to then say, what are you doing? And the questions that he was asking about the atrocities of the time and, budgets and whatever the National Party was doing. And, somebody then said, well, but, you always asking, it's like your sole mission is to embarrass, this government. And she said, no, it's not. My intention is not to embarrass you. My intention is to actually then, put to light what is your answers, which talks to what you are doing is the problem. So this is the kind of history that we come from. We have had Helen Zille that came in afterwards, also was somebody that assisted, by the way, during the struggle, was somebody that, reported quite a lot about what was happening. You're talking about, Steve Biko wrote extensively about that. There was an article when Steve Biko, died that came from Helen, while she was a journalist. And, she worked with people like Jacob Zuma during the struggle days and those that had to be smuggled in and out of the country. So there's a rich history there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. There's a rich history that is there about, the contribution. You had Ntate Joe Seremani, who then was also the chairperson of the party in the early 2000s. From the early 90s, 2000s was the chairperson of the party. Done stunning work as well, and had actually then been a contributor. But one thing that I've really appreciated about the Democratic Alliance, or the DP back then, was that even when Nelson Mandela said, look, we want to build a government of national unity, Tony had the foresight to then say, look, what we might need to do is to also be able to then have, an opposition or people that will be able to then play an oversight in terms of what government does. So when you have everybody singing Kumbaya, but who's then playing the oversight on the other side? It was, an unpopular decision, but which you then fast track to where we are right now has proven to be something that has really saved South Africa from a total collapse. Looking at how we've been able to then expose corruption, looking to how we have been able to push some reforms in terms of some of the laws that, had been introduced that were really pushing, that were really not helping, to then ensuring that we have the state captures. We now have the state capture now being exposed. So had we not had a strong opposition from the time when even Nelson Mandela was saying, look, let's build a government of national unity, you would have had people that are just jumping in and joining and getting ministerial positions. But ultimately, you would not be able to then have, the checks and balances being built or being brought in so that you're able to then keep government to account as well, which is something that the DA has been able to do, or the DP, then the DA.
With that said, the history of DA, there have been a number of, even you guys, former leaders, and there's a perception of racism within the DA. How true is that, and what's your experience of it?
Well, look, I find it very interesting that people will be in a party for 20 years, and the day that they decide to leave, then tomorrow they go out and say the party is racist.
Sounds like politics.
We're not seeing this all along. I've had people, friends, who have been with the DA for longer than I have been, contest elections, internally lose elections, and then the very next week they are out, and then, bashing the DA on their way out. You have had a leader that had left because, the person decided that they were going to ask their predecessor to judge their work. Grave mistake. Big mistake, because you can't ask your predecessor to judge you on what you were trying to achieve, because they will judge you on their standard. This is what they were trying to do. This is what you are trying to do. And then once you start seeing that the report that you thought that they were going to give you because you're the one who commissioned it is actually talking against what you were trying to do, you then try to stop that report. And because the party has already paid for that report to then come out, you then want to leave and then say, well, the party is not representing you anymore, and unfortunate. But I must also say, look, like in any other organizations, there will be people who don't agree, from time to time. I disagree a lot with John, with Ivan Mayer, with Helen, who disagree. But because I sit in a space where I'm able to then engage and I'm able to then say, I don't agree with you, we are able to then debate. And rigorously so, we're able to debate, and I will be able to then put my points across and allow FedEx, not just a single person, allow FedEx to apply its mind to what is being said. And this is something that I've come to appreciate in the DA, that I can tell the leader, I don't agree with you.
You guys executive.
Yeah, that's the top executive of the party.
Essentially.
So, yeah. So you are able to then go there and say to the leader, no, I don't agree with you on this particular issue, and this is what we will do. We'll take it there, and FedEx will apply its mind. And not just the leader, but the FedEx will make a decision to then say, maybe this is where we need to then go. This is something that I've come to appreciate about being in this kind of an organization. Yes, people want, to throw issues of race and say, oh, well, this is racist, that is racist. Some of the people who are facing internal disciplinary action coming their way, all of a sudden realizing that I'm going to lose this case, on their way out, soil the name of the party. After spending years and enjoying, the perks of being in parliament or in the legislature or being a councillor, now that you're on your way out, because you now made an agreement and an arrangement to go somewhere else, you have to now swallow the name of this organization. But not to then say that internally there hasn't been one or two people that would have otherwise come out wrong. And, you take those people head on and say, if you are going to make racist statement, I'm going to get you, disciplined and even fired. I've literally just fired now a councillor who actually went and actually brought the name of the party under disrepute, going into a community and saying that, people of a particular skin color must stick together. I said, not in this party. You cannot do that. So we're not only talking to that, but we're acting and we're keeping our own public representative to account for that. So, yeah, so people leave, and they join. We are a voluntary organization, but yeah, this is where we are.
So I understand that. Now, the position of DA on the Israel Palestine issue, I guess there is largely a perception.
Yeah.
What is the official stance of the DA on the Israel and Palestine?
I love the fact that you put the perception in there, because the DA has been very, very clear, even before this whole thing started, even before the attacks, the last attacks that happened from Palestine from Gaza to not the Iran one, but from Gaza to the missiles, the 500 or 600 missiles that they were talking about. Even before that, even when, there was, more encroachment into the Gaza Strip, we have been saying people need to genuinely get around the table and then find a two-state solution. We've been saying it. You can go into the documents of the DA, even before John was the leader. That has been the message. That has been our stance from the get-go. And we have been saying, if you take a side into an issue, then you cannot then bring people around the table, because you're then bringing people around the table already weighing on one side. And this is where South Africa missed the trick, or this is where the trick around South Africa came in. Before 1994. There were people who were saying everybody must come around the table, and we're not going to take the ANC or the IFP side or this side or that side. We need to then rebuild the country. And then that's when you're able to then get people to genuinely engage. That's how you ended up having CODESA, and you ended up having the democracy that we're celebrating. And also, more than the democracy that we're celebrating, you ended up also having one of the best constitution as it's regarded in the world. That's what we've been saying, to the Palestine-Israel issue, to then say, don't take sides. All people must come around the table. And yes, the ANC and others saw an opportunity to then pin the DA, to then say, you are, a Zionist organization, you are this, you are that, which is very much unfounded. But we understand why that was done. It was done to then say, no, let's focus on this so that we can then, take the attention from what is happening here at home. At some point, you have more people that are killed here than they are killed anywhere else in the world in war-torn countries. 87 people are killed a day in South Africa. We're not talking to that. You're having a situation where children are becoming stunted here in South Africa. You're not talking to that. You're having people that cannot even access electricity or have access to clean drinking water, have access to, to hospitals and to clinics. We're not talking about that, but we are talking about something that is happening somewhere in the Middle East. Not to say that is not important, but it then became an electioning tool against the DA here in South Africa. While we have been saying all along, let's find this, let's get people around the table. Don't take sides, but bring people around the table and say, how do you ensure that there's an Israel that is independent, that is able to then, decide how it wants to then govern itself, but also a Palestine that is not actually then under the oppression of any other, state, that they can be self-determination, they can hold election as and how they see fit, they can govern themselves as and how they see fit. That is something that we have been saying, but unfortunately, this is something that has now been turned into South African football.
The relationship between the DA and Israel. Mm-hmm. How would you break down that relationship or define it?
Well, we don't have a direct relationship with Israel as a country. We've tried to establish relationships with, different, call it ambassadors and high commissioners around the world. I mean, I sit in a team that it's an international team that goes and engages with different, representative of different countries in South Africa. We've met with African leaders, we've met with Asian leaders, we've met with leaders from the American side. We've met with leaders who are coming from Middle East. So we always meet and we always say, but what is in the best interest of everybody? So that has always been the talks. And this is something that we have always said, even when we engage with, with the US, to then say, we can talk about the AGOA as an example. How does it benefit South Africa, and how do we then ensure that it continues to then benefit South Africa? So there's more to it than just the engagement around a particular issue of war or a particular issue of discomfort. There's been a range of things that has been engaged upon, and that is something that we've always wanted to do, because we've always seen ourselves as a government in waiting. And therefore, you want to have relationship with everybody around the world, that, when you come into government, at least they even know this is where you stand as a party that is coming into power.
What's the position of the DA on land?
Well, there's the position on the DA on land is that land must be used. There must be maximization of it. Number one. Number two, that we must also then ensure that you also, have land that is correctly used, and I'll talk to you that in a moment. But also, more importantly, that people should actually then get access to land, but there should also be the protection of property. So we don't believe in the state owning land, as an example. We believe in individual. Yes, state can own pieces of land in terms of what they need to do, building a school, building a school, having a Department of Defense, having that. But we are saying that you can't just have land lying fallow, as an example. If you can then use that piece of land. There has been, statements that we have made around, land that is, good for farming and all of that, but that is just not being used. And we are now seeing the consequences of not having enough so that we're able to then produce for the people of South Africa and to be able to then export. So we have been saying, let's do a land audit. Let's see which parcels are there. Let's make sure that there is proper usage of land parcels. And even when there is land claims, we are saying that what we should then be doing is to then say, what is the best use of that piece of land? For instance, in Zimbabwe, people just grabbed pieces of land and took farms and all of that. And then it led to nothing. It led to no, farming activities that were taking place. But we are saying, is there any other way that people might be able to then benefit? So instead of grabbing the piece of farm or saying there's a land claim against this farm, and therefore, the person who's actually making use of that farm then gets to be moved away, you are able to then say, are we able to then have a joint ownership and or beneficiation that is taking place there? The person can continue, but the products or the produce from there or whatever the profit from there can actually then find a way into supporting the communities. That's not something that is foreign in South Africa. You go to Bakwena as an example, the Bakwena nation, the Platinum Nation. Go and see how many of them are able to then benefit, even if they are not themselves mining, but they're able to be taken to school. There's clinics that are being built. There's so many other things that they're able to then get as benefits out of that. And this is something that we have been saying, to say let's grab pieces of land or let's grab land for the sake of grabbing land is the easiest thing to do. But the question is, what do you do after that? And this is something that we've been saying. Do an audit of land that is available, see what land you want to use for what, and make the best use of that, and make sure that there is maximum beneficiation of it. And then that's been our policy.
Going into you guys' manifesto now, you guys would like to replace the Hawks and replace it with a Chapter 9 institution. Can you walk us through that? Well,
first of all, you cannot have a crime-busting institution that is reporting to a minister and asking for budgets from a minister. What happens when that minister's compromised, or the people within the minister's organization that are compromised? Do you think that a proper job will be done? No. You need an institution that reports directly to Parliament, that gets to be employed directly by Parliament, that enjoys protection from Parliament and the budgets coming from there, because then you will have an organization that is not beholden to any organization or to any person. You will have an institution that will do its job without fear or favor. You'll find an institution that is actually then much more effective. If you go back and you look at what the Scorpions were all about, you'll find that this is how they were able to then do their job much more successfully than what we have found right now after the governing party realized that, now it looks like we're a target. But who else will be a target if you are in government and you're the one who's ransacking the pairs? But you end up having a situation where you're saying for you to have an effective body, that body cannot be beholden to an organization, a political organization, or to a particular minister. Therefore, you want to then say they need to then employed or identified employed and report to Parliament. That's how you're able to then get much more out of them.
From the economic aspect,
Yeah.
you guys would like to create 2 million jobs
Yeah.
and take 6 million out of poverty.
Yeah.
Walk us through that practically.
Well, let me even take it down to Gauteng as an example.
Okay.
So you are now having 2.5 million people that are jobless in Gauteng. And you have 500,000 people of whom they've actually even given up looking for, or actually then getting into the job space, right? So you now need to then say, what do we do to make sure that we're able to then reverse the situation? The first thing that you need to then do is to then look at where government is actually spending its own money. Are we fixing infrastructure? Are we making sure that there's safety and security that, protects not only the people, but protects even the assets? I'm talking about physical assets. Are we able to then say, when you're talking about infrastructure, there's supply of electricity, supply of water, fixing of roads, making sure that sewer is not running all over, buildings that, are supposed to be there, are there, maintained. That's how you begin to then attract investment, when you've taken care of those things. But going back to then, how you then get the 2 million jobs is that you also now have an opportunity when, kids leave school and get into the working environment, that you can, which is something that had been done before when you're having, an introduction of what do you call it, the in-service training and all of that, where you are able to then send kids or send young adults into different sectors where they're able to then go for a year or two, be able to then do some work and get some experience in there, and be able to then get onto into the economic ladder. But also you have a situation where you are able to then say, are we able to look at tax incentives that can be introduced towards the business people or towards investors, so that they continue to not to only invest, but to grow the investments that they have here? Because that also attracts, a lot of job opportunities. I'll give an example. Ford, said, look, there's certain things that we want to do around the Mamelodi area. We want to then expand and actually then bid for, the new Ford Everest, which they got, and the Everest and the Ranger. So what they ended up doing is to then say, look, we want government to do certain things. You invest in those things. You expand the road. You give them a piece of land to expand the farm. And they give you 4,000 jobs, permanent jobs, and then tens of thousands of other small business opportunities for, people in the surrounding area. And then you get the economy going in that way. So we are saying that can be done and should be done. But what you need to then do is to then, from a government perspective, deal with issues of corruption internally, be able to have policy certainty, to be able to then get people, to know that if I invest, this is what I'm investing into, and this is what, this government is demanding of me. Thirdly is to invest in infrastructure. Fourthly is to invest in your safety and security, and run a government that is also not going to hinder, small businesses or businesses. Right now, we've had a situation where there's been so much draconian, laws and red tape that is actually then discouraging people from investing, discouraging people from starting businesses, which is something that is actually now a big problem. And if you're talking about creation of jobs, that's what we now need to be looking at.
In terms of stance of the DA when it comes to the West and the East, your AGOA, your Sakum, what is it? The southern, the SADC components.
The economic, what is it called?
Yes, it's Sagum. That versus the BRICS.
Yeah.
Where does the DA stand in terms of, if 1st June comes, you guys get the overwhelming majority, which way would we see the country going?
I think the figures speak for themselves. Go and look at the countries that are our biggest trading partners. If you go and look at who our biggest trading partners are and how the ANC is busy hopping and jumping up and down about, no, let's go this way, let's go that way. But you look at who your biggest trading partners are. You have the biggest trading partners being being the US, being Germany, and your list. And those that are contributing, by the way, to your West or to your deficit. Russia, China, because they want to bring in more than what you are able to then get to them. That also now talks to your trade deficit. We now need to then say, how do you get a trade, a balance in South Africa, and who are the people that have been assisting in getting us into that? So that should be, instead of then saying we want to take a side this way or that way, you need to then say, how do you then create a trade balance that is in favor of South Africa? Those that are able to then give you the trading, opportunity that, favor South Africa. That's who we should be going with. And I promise you, where this government has been going, if you were to look at the economic stats, you'll be shocked that people are even thinking of continuing to go this way or defending these decisions.
Is that not based on the fact that historically the West have had an oppressive method of doing business? If you just look at the number of countries that were colonizers in the West, is one not saying, okay, maybe this direction because of that? I assume that's a mentality which a lot of the people do have.
Look, nobody can wipe away history. You can't. History is history. It is what it is. There has been a history of colonization, and we know, the good and the bad that came of it, right? So you now need to then say, but who is able to then, are you able to sit around the table and get the best deal for your people? And when I say your people, I'm talking about the whole of South Africa. Who are we able to then say, who can we trade with that will get the maximum, exposure to the rest of the world? Who are we able to then get more goods to instead of having goods dumped into South Africa? Who are we able to then say, is able to be a reliable trade partner that is seeing us as a partner, not as a new, cow that they can milk then going forward? I think this is where the conversation needs to be going. We need to then say, what is the best, for South Africa and where we want to then go? Can we continue with trade deficits and then, on the hope of just hanging on to an ideal that, is not benefiting the rest of, or that is not benefiting South Africa?
So would you say it's an increasing or decreasing trade deficit?
Well, we have an increasing trade deficit, and it's not created. Is not created by those that are the major investors or the major trading partners. It has been created by those that we are so close to at this point in time, but have been contributors of our deficit. Right. And that's something that, is very much interesting to then see and to then say, but why are we beholden, and it cannot just be sentimental attachment. It should be about bread and butter issues. It should be about what are we getting at the end of the day. If you are going to look at countries that have now started questioning why they are so, the new partners have come in, you realize that, it's led to trade deficit, it's led to mineral resources now being, I will use the term colonized. You go to a country like Zambia, the new now copper belt mines, look at who are the new owners and what are the terms there. Those that are saying, no, we'll build you new dams and we'll build new water purification plants. Look at what are the terms of those loans. You fail to pay me, I own this water. How do you own a country's natural resource like water that the people are going to need? So these are some of the things that when you're talking about who you want to trade with and who will become your partner, you need to then be asking. We're not colonized anymore. We can think for ourselves and we can go either way. But you need to then be asking yourself, what is it that your people, your country are going to get at the end of the day? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it going to then increase the probability of people finding jobs, people being able to then survive? Or is it something that is going to ultimately lead you to having a situation where your resources or your water is owned by somebody else, as an example?
Given time constraints, obviously one can't go into all of the manifesto, which is very long. But just to note, the NSFAS model that you guys are proposing, can you walk us through that?
Well, look, let me quickly just say on the issue of the register is to make sure that, there is consistency in how decisions are taken, and not just on the basis of because somebody is a political figure or somebody is favored, that, a decision to not just pursue a case, gets to be taken. And we have seen, people then, cases being dropped, and you would know of judges that, had to actually be struck off because of, decisions that they would have taken. That is something that you now look at. Going back onto the issue of the NSFAS, look, the NSFAS has been a problem in South Africa. It has helped. We're not taking that away. It has helped quite a number of students that find themselves in difficult situations. And, the system has always been there. Before, when I was going to university, there was something called TEFSA, which was then the...
Revealing your age?
Yeah, well, that's fine, So at that time, there was something called TEFSA at that time. So it's always been a system that government introduced to try and then assist those that are going into institutions of higher learning. But we have seen more problems coming with it, where money is not going where it's supposed to go. You would remember the lady who was given millions, and ended up buying bags. The money that was transferred into her account, and obviously then that was claimed back, and she was charged. But you now need to then have a situation where you have a proper qualifying criteria. There are people that are benefiting that shouldn't be benefiting, and there are people that should be benefiting that are not benefiting. You want to have a system that is able to then ensure that there is a fair but strict process, so that you don't end up having people that should be benefiting that are locked out. And because I know somebody, I'm able to then get my forms approved and all of that. Without due diligence being done and proper assessment being done, you might find that Msimanga's son, who Soli can pay for, finds himself onto that. Yet there is somebody who is out there desperate, in need, and there's no way that this person will be able to then pay for. So we are saying introduce that, a level of accountability. And also be able to then put it in layers that you're able to then say there are people that might be able to then pay to a certain level. So you're not really locking everybody out, but you're also now not saying it's a one-size-fits-all blanket approach. You're able to then say who needs what, at what level, assist them in that. That way you are able to then cover more people. You're able to then cover more needs that are out there. And I think at this point in time, we have seen now with the latest scandal around that hasn't been implemented, and that has led to millions that have been squandered and we have lost. And this is something that we cannot have going forward.
Everyone that goes through NSFAS would have been previously disadvantaged to some extent. Having them have a loan or debt afterwards as they start their working life, does one not see that as a bit of a regressive step?
Most people, had to go, even before NSFAS was introduced, TEFSAS and all of that, had to go through that. And we now need to then say, am I getting helped? Shouldn't I also be able to then help somebody that comes after me? Because it's not going to be money that is just endlessly coming out. At some point, we now need to then say, this is a fund that is available. Those that are taking out somehow must put back in so that we continuously have this fund, being able to then support those. But I am saying to you, if we stop the corruption that is taking place, and you talk about how people who are previously disadvantaged, and this has been a problem that we've been sitting with in South Africa, is that even people who are not disadvantaged, because now of my skin color, should I then say I'm previously disadvantaged forever and ever? Even when you're talking to tenders. That's how you end up having billionaires. How are you disadvantaged? We should be saying you are now empowered, and there should be means to check your disadvantage. It cannot just be your skin color. It should be the other financial means to determine whether you are disadvantaged or not. Because right now you're having a situation where people who, as I said, can pay for their kids to go to university, benefiting from this. Yet you have parents that are not able to. They're looking at this child and saying, you are my last hope. But because I cannot get you to university, and because somebody who could pay didn't pay, now you are locked out of opportunity. That is unfair.
What's DA's stance on BEE?
Well, what we are saying,
transformation altogether.
Transformation needs to happen in South Africa, and we've been saying this for a very long time. But you don't do something by you don't transform by just talking. You transform by doing certain things. And what we have seen in South Africa is that BEE has only actually benefited only the few. And I can give you names of people that are now going to court because of their asbestos contracts and all of that. And people who became billionaires. But what should have happened is to then say, you want people to then come into a system. You need to grow the cake so that more and more people can come into the system and benefit. But there needs to be a threshold. It cannot be that every time you come in and want to claim previously disadvantaged, even when you're advantaged, you come in to drop off your tender document driving in a Bentley, and then you in there, you're putting that you are disadvantaged. What about that SIPO that is coming from there that still now is hoping to get into the tender world, as an example?
What to then you guys replace it with?
What we have been saying is that we need to do a means test. That should then be the determinant of whether you are disadvantaged or advantaged. Yes, it will favor majority black people and colored people if you were to then look at the economic dynamics, right? So, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it automatically then exclude white people, it automatically exclude Indian people, because you're looking at means. You're not looking purely on race basis. Because the system as it has been put together by the ANC has actually then benefited not even black people. It's only a few that it's created a league, if you like, of wealthy and rich people, while the majority continue to then suffer. So that cannot be then a good story to tell, to then say you've now transformed. You needed to have transformed the majority right now. You needed to transform a majority of small businesses that not only benefited from contracts of government, but are also now able to then stand on their own. Besides doing government work, they're able to then also become producers. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we have created a system of middlemen. And this is what it's been all about. You have somebody who goes and pick up a tender document, looks at the tender document and say there's a need to supply bottles of water. Goes even outside of South Africa, goes to China and say, how much, can you give me so many bottles? Yes, I can give you so many bottles. Comes and put the price at 3 times what he's going to pay. Submit, gets the job, import those bottles, and then we are there. We go from there. Where is the value in that? The value is now going to an individual. Instead of then saying we are going to create jobs to be able to then build industries, to be able to then produce here in South Africa, so that we are able to then create employment beyond, what is required. Why are you importing toothpicks, as an example? Why are we not having people that are able to produce shoe polish? If government wanted for defense force or for the South African police, then you can do that. But if you are empowered to then be able to then deliver this product, if you are empowered, you should then be able to then build markets, and you should be able to then build production lines that should sustain you beyond you supplying government. That's how you build entrepreneurship. That's how you build businesses, not build a whole lot of middlemen who just, come and get a tender document, add up a markup, go and get it somewhere else. And then, you're saying then you build in business. That's not it.
I understand we're in election season and campaigning, but there has been some comments or perception that the messaging of the DA seems rather alarmist. It seems like it attacks as opposed to focusing on itself, which in this interview you've done. Like we've gone through the content of the manifesto and we've put forward why DA. But the messaging sometimes, what informs it?
Give me an example of the message that you'd be talking to. Rescue South Africa?
Yeah, rescue
Okay, I'll tell you why we said rescue South Africa. South Africa is, if you look at, by any measure, the economy, we're tanking. Infrastructure has fallen apart. The education system is falling apart. Health system is falling apart. Governance in South Africa is actually then falling apart. Now, South Africa needs rescuing. We're not being alarmist, but we are saying The reality is that these are things that have gone wrong, or these are things that are wrong, which if you were to look at, the governance standard, global governance standard, points to a failed state. We're not there yet, but we are on the cliff of becoming a failed state. Before we get to being another state of another failed African state, let's turn the corner. Let's avoid a situation where we will not be able to then have electricity supplied. Let's have a situation where we will avoid having water shedding, as an example. Let's avoid a situation where our education system will produce people that cannot compete with the best in the world. You wouldn't want to have a doctor that is examining you who has passed with 30%, would you? But why we have that? Why have we killed, and we continuously killed, vocational schooling, schools that have been able to then give us artisans. We used to export even the best of artisans to the rest of the world. You go to Australia, you go to the UK, you see how many of South African artisans are now working there. But we're not producing them as we used to produce them. And we need to then look into these things and say, are we really heading in the right direction? And I promise you, the majority of the people in South Africa are saying we're heading in the wrong direction. So our message is not tone deaf. Our message is not wrong. It's to then say, everybody, you are now seeing that we're going the wrong direction, but we now need to rescue this country before it falls off the cliff.
Okay. In 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Why should SA vote for Msimanga and the DA?
Well, in Gauteng, the people must vote for a governing party that has a strategy in terms of fixing the infrastructure. We are the only party that has developed a costed, workable, bankable infrastructure master plan. We're the only party that is going to then be able to then turn the safety and security around. In that, we will be able to then be the party that can demonstrate good governance, but also be able to then attract investment, that we can get the economy going, we can get better quality services to our people, but we can have a government that is accountable. You do that in Gauteng, you would know that Gauteng contributes about 38% of South Africa's GDP. You do that, you are able to then sneeze and the whole of South Africa will catch that flu, where we're able to then get things right. We're able to then start fixing things, not only in Gauteng, but across South Africa. That's what we want to do, and that's what we will do, but we need that power. This is why we're asking for the people to vote for us.
Thank you for making time to come here and make things palatable for us.
Thank you very much, TJ.
Guys, you heard it for yourselves, live from the horse's mouth. Don't forget to come out on the 29th of May. Make your mark, make your vote count. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Same place, same time next week.